welcome back to the channel. If you're trying to get as many travel reward points as quickly as possible through credit card sign-up bonuses, you've probably wondered about which cards to apply for and in what order so that you can maximize both your approval odds and your velocity. In this video, I'm going to run through my suggested travel card application order for 2023 and give you some guidelines that will hopefully be useful for the next several years too. If you've done some digging already, you may have encountered this flowchart on Reddit, which is a great resource for figuring this stuff out. I'll leave a link to it in the video description below. As usual, you'll also find a number of other resources there to help you maximize travel credit card rewards, like my travel card comparison spreadsheet, so check those out as well. And if you do decide to apply for any of the cards I talk about here, consider using my referral links, which are also in the description. For general purposes, if you follow the flowchart, you'll probably do pretty well, but if you're like me and are mostly just interested in transferable travel point currencies like Amex membership rewards, Chase Ultimate rewards, Capital One miles, and Citi thank you points, then I think there are some better ways to optimize approval odds and velocity than what the flowchart suggests in some cases. Of course, you should always do your own due diligence, especially because this space is changing all the time, but this is what I've come up with in 2023. For starters, the conventional wisdom for the early game is that the first 5 personal cards you should get, assuming you haven't gotten any other cards in the last 2 years, are Chase cards. This is because Chase has an infamous anti-churning policy known as the 524 rule, which means that they will automatically reject your application if you've opened 5 or more cards in the last 24 months. There are a few known exceptions to this, but all of Chase's Ultimate Rewards cards strictly follow this rule. And this rule is so well known that most people playing this game will refer to their new card status in terms of 524. So for example, we start our application order at 024, meaning we've opened 0 cards in the last 24 months, and then after getting the first card, we'll be at 124, and so on. Naturally, for a long time, it's made sense to get 5 Chase cards first, before moving on to other banks, just so that you're not locked out of Chase and can continue applying for new cards at high velocity instead of having to wait 2 years before your next application. But the problem with this strategy is that in recent years, basically since the pandemic, several other banks have gotten a lot stingier with their approvals, in part to reduce liability from churners. For travel card enthusiasts in particular, really great cards like the Citi Premier and Capital One Venture X can be really hard to get when you're at 524 or higher. So waiting until you're done with Chase to apply for these may not be such a good idea. In fact, if you're going for high velocity, which means applying for a new card about every 3 months, it may not be possible to get either of these cards at 4, 3, or even 224, because Capital One and Citi are looking to make sure that you haven't applied for more than just a couple of cards in the last 6 to 12 months. And they're sensitive not just to new accounts opened, but also to new hard inquiries. So even if you were rejected for a card recently, they'll still hold that against you. So in my opinion, the best strategy for max velocity in travel cards is actually to start with the Premier and Venture X cards as the first 2 cards you apply for. That way, you'll be guaranteed to pass any anti-churning measures Citi and Capital One might have in place. The order you apply for these 2 probably isn't super important, so just decide based on whether or not the Citi Premier card, for example, has an elevated sign-up bonus offer, because it can sometimes be found with an offer of 80,000 points for spending just $4,000 in 3 months. After you get these 2 cards, you can then move on to finish your 524 setup with Chase. But one important thing to keep in mind here is that the 524 rule kind of cuts both ways. Sure, it means that you'll be locked out of Chase if you're over 524, but it also means that as long as you're under 524 and your credit score is good enough, you're pretty likely to be approved for a Chase card. In particular, this means that Chase is not very inquiry sensitive. So a good way to get around Chase's restrictions is to apply for business cards. Business credit card applications do pull your credit, so they will result in hard inquiries, which Citi and Capital One care about, but most business cards don't actually show up as new accounts on your credit report, so they don't count towards your 524 status. That means you can spend time churning subs for business cards while actually lowering your 524 status. So if you're willing and able to get business cards, the best strategy after getting Premier and Venture X would be to first get whatever other Citi and Capital One cards you want. For transferable travel rewards, I'd recommend the Citi Custom Cash and Capital One Saver cards, but do keep in mind that Capital One often only allows you to have at most 2 personal cards with them. And then you can start getting business cards. The ones I'd recommend are the Capital One Spark Cash Plus, the Chase Ink Preferred, Ink Cash, and Ink Unlimited, and the American Express, Business Platinum, Business Gold, Business Green, and Blue Business Plus. A couple of notes about these: the Spark Cash Plus is the only Capital One business card that won't show up on your personal credit report, so don't apply for any of the other Capital One business cards. And although the Chase Ink Business Premier looks like just as good a candidate as any of the other Ink cards, the cashback it earns actually cannot be converted to transferable points. So if you're looking for travel rewards, that's not a good pick. Otherwise, this makes a list of 8 business cards. So if you space out the applications by 3 months, that will take you a full 2 years and completely reset your 524 status back to 024. Then you can easily apply for any 5 personal Chase cards. For transferable travel rewards, there are really only 3 cards you need, and those are the Sapphire Preferred or Sapphire Reserve. You have to pick one of those, the Freedom Flex, and the Freedom Unlimited. After that, you can spend your remaining 2 524 slots on whatever other Chase personal cards you want, like maybe the Amazon, Hyatt, Southwest, or United cards. And some of those you might be able to get even if you're over 524, but it's less of a risk if you're not. On the other hand, if you don't want to apply for business cards for whatever reason, then you should go for the Chase Trifecta immediately after getting City Premier and Venture X to complete your 524 setup. Once you're at 524, then you can try to get the other Citi and Capital One cards at that point. You may be rejected, but they're not quite as picky with their other cards as they are with Premier and Venture X. Now, at this point, if all you care about is transferable travel rewards, then your 524 status no longer matters because you will be skipping the mid-game and have officially entered the late game, i.e. American Express. Amex has 2 main anti-churning measures in place that you'll need to keep in mind. The first one is called the once-in-a-lifetime rule, which basically says that you're only eligible for a sign-up bonus for a card once in your life, and that is before you are a primary account holder for that card. If you acquire primary ownership for a card at any point for any reason, even if you're just upgrading or downgrading a different card, then you will no longer be eligible for a sign-up bonus for that card on any future applications. So the important thing to remember here is that you never want to upgrade or downgrade to an Amex card unless you have already gotten a sign-up bonus for that card at some point before. The second anti-churning measure is called pop-up jail, which is not so much a rule as it is a somewhat mysterious restriction that Amex places on certain accounts that prevents them from getting a sign-up bonus when they apply for certain cards. The way this works is that about halfway through a new credit card application, you will notice a pop-up on the application page that tells you that you are not eligible for the sign-up bonus and asks if you'd like to continue with the application anyways. This happens before any credit checks, so it won't hurt your score, but it's still really annoying regardless. No one knows exactly what triggers pop-up jail or exactly what you need to do to get out of it, but here are some general tips that have been found to be helpful, at least anecdotally. 1. Wait at least 2 years before closing or downgrading an Amex card. It's well known that if you try to close your account before the 1-year mark, that Amex will claw back your sign-up bonus. But even closing or downgrading your account just after 1 year will indicate to Amex that you are a churner, and they will shut you down from getting other sign-up bonuses in the future. 2. Put a lot of spend on your Amex cards. Amex may take you out of jail or refrain from locking you up in the first place if they view you as a profitable customer. Since they run their own payment network and make most of their money from transaction fees as opposed to interest, they love customers that spend a lot on their cards, and they'll be much more willing to give you bonuses and other perks. 3. Try applying for other cards if you find yourself in jail for one of them. Just because you're in jail for a particular card doesn't mean you'll be in jail for others. Amex's high annual fee charge cards, which often have the best sign-up bonuses, tend to be easier to avoid jail for than their lower-tier credit cards. 4. Try other links to the application page. Sometimes the right referral link or a link from a partner website like Resi, Hilton, or Delta will bypass pop-up jail. As long as you can steer clear of these anti-churning measures, it should be pretty easy to get Amex cards and their bonuses. For transferable travel points, you'll be looking at the membership rewards cards, which are the Platinum, Gold, Green, Everyday Preferred, and Everyday cards. You can apply for these in any order, just look for elevated sign-up bonuses, and after that, you'll be done. Apart from these Amex cards, you will in principle be able to close out your accounts and apply for them again later to get the bonuses again, but keep in mind that some of these cards may require you to wait an extended period of time before you're eligible for the bonus again, so be sure to look that up. If you'd also like to include some cashback or airline or hotel cards in the mix, then this will be the mid-game. You'll want to go for these before starting on the Amex membership rewards cards, just to improve your approval odds, but after you've gotten through 524. So unfortunately, that means you may be locked out of other Chase cards, but you might still be able to get some cards from Citi, Capital One, Barclays, US Bank, and Bank of America. Though, like I said, getting approved past 524 has become a lot harder recently, so be prepared to face some rejections. You can consult the Reddit flowchart for more suggestions and guidelines on that front. Obviously, if there are other Amex cards that interest you, apart from the MR cards, save those for the end, and keep in mind that you're generally only going to be allowed to have 4 or 5 Amex credit cards in total. That doesn't include charge cards like the Platinum, Gold, Green, and their business variants, but it does include the Everyday and Everyday Preferred cards as well as the Blue Business Plus. So if you plan on getting all 3 of those, you may only be able to get 1 or 2 more Amex credit cards, at least until you close some of the others. Finally, just a note about pacing and velocity. Many banks have velocity restrictions for their applications, so make sure to look into those before applying for many cards in quick succession. Generally speaking, if you're waiting 3 months between applications, you should be fine, but if you're planning on applying more rapidly, you may run into issues, so do your due diligence there. Otherwise, if you found this video useful, give it a like and consider subscribing, and if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about my suggested application order, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to know what you all think. Until next time, safe travels.